Roman Empire, Episode 2. The Legend of Romulus and Remus. Myth, Memory, and the Birth of Rome. Opening, a city born from story. Before Rome became a republic, before it ruled Italy, before its legions crossed seas and mountains, before emperors sat beneath marble ceilings and called themselves masters of the world, Rome was first a story. Not a simple story, and not a peaceful one, but a story of abandoned children, divine ancestry, wild animals, family conflict, sacred hills, and blood spilled between brothers. Every ancient civilization needed an origin. The Greeks had their heroic cities and divine founders. The Egyptians had their sacred kings and cosmic order. The Romans, too, needed to explain where they came from and why their city was destined for greatness. But Rome's founding myth is unusual, because it does not begin with perfect harmony. It begins with danger. It begins with exile, violence, rivalry, and survival. The legend of Romulus and Remus was not written as modern history. It was a memory shaped by poetry, politics, religion, and national identity. Roman writers such as Livy, Plutarch, and later poets preserved different versions of the story, and they were often writing centuries after the events were supposed to have happened. For that reason, we must read the myth carefully. We should not ask only, did this happen exactly like this? We should also ask, what did Romans believe this story revealed about themselves? Because in the legend of Romulus and Remus, Rome tells us what kind of city it imagined itself to be. A city protected by the gods, but born in conflict. A city that valued family, but could sacrifice family for destiny. A city that honored law and sacred boundaries, but also remembered that its first king killed his own brother. This is the darkness and power of Rome's beginning. Tonight we move into the world of myth before the state, before the Senate, before the Republic, before the Empire. We return to the banks of the Tiber River, to the hills of early Latium, and to the story of two infants who were left to die, but instead became the beginning of Rome. From Troy to Italy, the deep ancestry of Rome. The story of Romulus and Remus does not stand alone. Roman tradition connected the birth of Rome to an older and more famous world, the world of Troy. After the Trojan War, according to legend, the Trojan hero Aeneas escaped the burning city with his father Anchises, his son Aeneas, and the sacred household gods of Troy. He wandered across the Mediterranean until destiny brought him to Italy. This connection to Troy mattered deeply to Roman identity. It gave Rome an ancient and noble ancestry. It connected the Romans to the heroic age of Greek myth, but it also allowed them to stand apart from Greece. Rome could say, in effect, we are not simply students of the Greeks. We come from the survivors of Troy, from the people who endured destruction and carried sacred destiny westward. In Virgil's epic poem, the Aeneid, written much later during the age of Augustus, Aeneas becomes the model of Roman duty. He is not only a warrior, he is a man burdened by fate. He loses his homeland, sacrifices personal happiness, obeys the gods, and carries the future on his shoulders. His great quality is pietas, a Roman word that means duty toward the gods, family, ancestors, and state. According to tradition, Aeneas settled in Latium and became connected to the local royal line. His descendants eventually founded Alba Longa, a city in the Alban Hills southeast of Rome. Alba Longa became the legendary mother city of Rome, the place from which the line of Romulus and Remus would emerge. This Trojan ancestry was not merely decorative. It helped Rome imagine its history as a continuation of something sacred and ancient. Rome was not born by accident. It was the result of destiny moving through generations, from Troy to Aeneas, from Aeneas to Alba Longa, from Alba Longa to the twins, and from the twins to the city that would one day rule the Mediterranean. But destiny in Roman stories rarely moves peacefully. It moves through suffering, betrayal, and blood. Alba Longa, a stolen throne, and a dangerous birth. Generations after Aeneas, the royal family of Alba Longa fell into conflict. Two brothers stood at the center of the story, Numitor and Amulius. Numitor was the rightful king, but Amulius seized the throne. To secure his power, Amulius needed to make sure Numitor's family could not produce future heirs. Numitor had a daughter named Rhea Silvia. Amulius forced her to become a Vestal virgin, a priestess of the goddess Vesta. This was a political move disguised as religion. Vestal virgins were expected to remain unmarried and childless. By placing Rhea Silvia in this sacred role, Amulius hoped to end Numitor's bloodline without openly murdering her. But according to the legend, Rhea Silvia became pregnant by the god Mars. This detail is essential. Mars was not only a god of war, he was also connected to fertility, land, strength, and the protection of the Roman people. By making Mars the father of Romulus and Remus, the myth gives Rome a divine and martial origin. Rome is born from a priestess and a war god, from sacred order and violent power. When Rhea Silvia gave birth to twin boys, Amulius saw them as a threat. Their very existence meant the old royal line had survived. He ordered the infants to be killed. But the servants, unwilling or afraid to murder the children directly, placed them in a basket and set them upon the waters of the Tiber River. This is one of the most powerful images in the entire Roman imagination. Two helpless infants floating on the river, abandoned by human politics, carried by nature and destiny. The Tiber becomes more than geography. It becomes a sacred force in Rome's birth. The river that would later feed, protect, and connect Rome first carries its founders towards survival. The basket did not disappear into death. It came to rest near the foot of the Palatine Hill, one of the hills that would later become the heart of Rome. There the story leaves the world of kings and enters the world of wilderness, the she-wolf and the wilderness of early Rome. After the twins were left by the river, Roman tradition says they were found and nursed by a she-wolf. This image became one of the most famous symbols in Roman history. The lupa, the she-wolf, bending over the abandoned twins, feeding them not as human children of a palace, but as children of the wild. The she-wolf symbol is rich and strange. It suggests that Rome was not born soft. It was not raised in luxury. It survived through the strength of the natural world. The founders were royal by blood, divine by father, but their first protection came from an animal associated with hunger, danger, and wild survival. Later, a shepherd named Faustulus discovered the twins and brought them home. He and his wife, often named Acca Larentia in the tradition, raised Romulus and Remus as their own children. This part of the story places the founders between worlds. They are royal, but raised as shepherds. They are divine, but they grow among ordinary people. They belong to destiny, but they learn life from the countryside. This matters because Rome always loved the image of rural virtue. Later Romans often imagined their oldest ancestors as strong, disciplined farmers and shepherds, close to the land, hardened by work, and morally superior to the luxury of foreign courts. The childhood of Romulus and Remus fits that ideal. They are not raised in a palace. They are raised among hills, flocks, fields, and danger. As they grew older, the twins became strong, bold, and natural leaders. They fought robbers, protected local shepherds, and gathered companions around them. Their identity slowly became impossible to hide. Eventually, the truth of their birth was revealed. They were not ordinary shepherd boys. They were descendants of Numitor, grandsons of the rightful king of Alba Longa, and sons of Mars. The twins returned to Alba Longa, overthrew Amulius, and restored Numitor to the throne. At this moment, they could have remained in Alba Longa and enjoyed royal status. But their destiny was not to inherit an old city. Their destiny was to found a new one. So they returned to the place where they had been saved, the hills near the Tiber. The choice of the hill, Palatine and Aventine. When Romulus and Remus decided to found a city, the question became where exactly it should stand. Romulus preferred the Palatine Hill. Remus preferred the Aventine. This disagreement may seem simple, but in Roman memory it carried great meaning. The city's birth depended not only on land, but on sacred approval. The twins turned to augury, the practice of reading divine signs through the flight of birds. In Roman religion, the gods did not speak casually. Their approval had to be interpreted through signs, rituals, and sacred procedure. The founding of a city was not merely a human decision, it required divine consent. According to one version of the story, Remus saw 6 birds first, but Romulus later saw 12. This created a dispute. Was Remus favored because he saw the birds first? Or was Romulus favored because he saw more? The myth captures a deep Roman concern. Power must be justified, but signs can be interpreted in more than one way. This is one of the reasons the story feels so Roman. It is not just about emotion or adventure. It is about authority, ritual, law, and interpretation. Who has the right to rule? Who reads the signs correctly? When 2 claims both appear valid, what decides the future? Romulus began marking the sacred boundary of his new city on the Palatine. This boundary was called the Pomerium. In Roman thought, a city was not just a collection of houses, it was a sacred and legal space. To found a city was to separate order from chaos, inside from outside, civic life from wilderness. Then came the fatal moment. Remus mocked the boundary. In some versions, he jumped over the wall or trench that Romulus had marked. To modern eyes, it may seem like a small act, but in the logic of the myth, it was not small. The boundary of the city was sacred. To violate it was to disrespect the future of Rome itself. Romulus killed Remus. This is the darkest moment in the founding legend. Rome begins not only with divine signs and rescued children, but with fratricide, brother killing brother. Later Romans did not remove this violence from the story, they preserved it. They allowed the first blood of Rome to be family blood. Romulus is said to have declared that this would be the fate of anyone who crossed Rome's walls. The message was brutal, but clear. The city comes first. Its boundaries are sacred. Its security is above personal affection. Rome is born from love of power, fear of disorder, and the willingness to defend its limits with violence. Romulus the founder, king, warrior, and organizer. After the death of Remus, Romulus became the sole founder and first king of Rome. Tradition dates the foundation of the city to 753 BC. This date became central to Roman chronology. Later Romans counted years from the founding of the city, ab urbe condita, meaning from the city having been founded. Romulus now had to do more than mark a boundary. He had to create a people. A city cannot exist with walls alone. It needs inhabitants, families, rituals, defense, leadership, and institutions. The early Roman legend understands this clearly. Founding a city is not only an act of construction, it is an act of organization. According to tradition, Romulus opened Rome as a place of asylum. He invited fugitives, exiles, runaway slaves, adventurers, and displaced men to join the new community. This detail is important because it gives Rome a mixed origin. Rome is not presented as a pure city born from one perfect people. It is a gathering place. It grows by absorbing outsiders. This became one of the most important patterns in Roman history. Rome was often violent toward enemies, but it was also unusually skilled at incorporation. Over time, it would absorb families, tribes, allies, defeated communities, foreign gods, Greek culture, Italian manpower, provincial elites, and eventually emperors from outside Italy. The asylum of Romulus is the mythic beginning of Rome's habit of expansion through inclusion. Romulus also created early political and military structures. Tradition credits him with organizing the people, forming the Senate, dividing citizens into groups, and establishing patterns of command. We should not treat all these details as literal facts from one man's reign. They are later Roman attempts to explain how their institutions began. But they show what Romans wanted from a founder, not only courage, but organization. Romulus is therefore more than a warrior. He is the first image of Roman state building. He creates boundaries, gathers people, consults the gods, establishes authority, and prepares the city for war. In him, Rome imagines its oldest political personality, sacred, violent, practical, ambitious, and disciplined. The Sabine women and the problem of survival. The new city had a problem. It had men, but not enough women to create families and future generations. A city without families cannot last. Rome needed continuity. It needed marriage, children, alliances, and domestic stability. The legend responds with one of its most difficult and disturbing episodes, the seizure of the Sabine women. According to tradition, Romulus invited neighboring peoples to a festival. During the event, Roman men seized young women from the visiting communities, especially the Sabines, and took them as wives. Ancient authors often present this as a political solution to a demographic problem, but we should read it carefully. The story is violent, and it reveals the harshness of the world Rome imagined at its beginning. The neighboring peoples were outraged, and war followed. The Sabines attacked Rome. In the most famous version, the conflict ended when the Sabine women themselves intervened between their Roman husbands and Sabine fathers and brothers. They stood between the fighting men and begged them to stop because the war had turned their families against each other. This moment transforms the story. The women who had been taken by force become mediators between communities. The result is not the destruction of the Sabines, but their union with Rome. The Sabine king, Titus Tatius, is said to have ruled jointly with Romulus for a time, and the Sabines became part of the Roman people. Again, the myth reveals a Roman pattern. Conflict becomes incorporation. Violence is followed by union. Enemies become citizens. Outsiders become Romans. The story does not erase the brutality of the beginning, but it uses that brutality to explain the growth of the community. For Roman identity, this mattered deeply. Rome did not imagine itself as a city formed only by one bloodline. It imagined itself as a city formed by mixture. Trojans and Latins, shepherds and exiles, Romans and Sabines. Rome's power would later come not only from conquest, but from the ability to turn conquered or neighboring peoples into part of a larger Roman system. Myth and archaeology. What can we know? When we study Romulus and Remus in a university-style way, we must separate two questions. First, what did Romans say about their beginning? Second, what can historians and archaeologists know about early Rome? The legend gives us names, drama, divine ancestry, sacred signs, and moral meaning. Archaeology gives us a different kind of evidence. It shows that the area of Rome was inhabited long before the traditional foundation date. The hills near the Tiber had small settlements, huts, burials, and communities that gradually developed over time. Rome was probably not founded in a single day by one man. It more likely emerged through the slow growth and joining of communities on the hills. The Palatine Hill is especially important. Archaeological evidence suggests early settlement there during the Iron Age. This fits the importance given to the Palatine in Roman memory. The Tiber River also made Rome's location valuable. It offered access to trade, movement, salt routes, and communication between inland Italy and the coast. Geography helped explain why a settlement there could grow. But archaeology does not make the myth useless. Myths are historical evidence of another kind. They show what a society believed about itself. The legend of Romulus and Remus tells us that Romans saw their city as sacred, violent, mixed, disciplined, and destined. It tells us that boundaries mattered. It tells us that divine approval mattered. It tells us that war, family, and political order were connected from the beginning. The story also contains memories of real social processes. The union with the Sabines may reflect the merging of neighboring communities. The asylum may reflect Rome's openness to outsiders. The conflict between hills may reflect the joining of separate settlements. The sacred boundary may reflect real rituals of city foundation used in ancient Italy. So we do not have to choose between myth and history as if one destroys the other. Instead, we can read them together. The myth gives Rome's emotional truth. Archaeology gives Rome's material development. Together they show us a city that grew from a real landscape and then explained itself through sacred story. Closing. The meaning of Rome's first story. The legend of Romulus and Remus is not a gentle beginning. It is a story of abandoned children, a stolen throne, divine fatherhood, a she-wolf, shepherds, sacred birds, rival hills, a murdered brother, and a city that rises from violence. Rome did not imagine itself as innocent. It imagined itself as chosen, tested, and hardened from the beginning. Romulus gives Rome many of its oldest themes. The city is protected by the gods, but it must fight for survival. It welcomes outsiders, but it demands loyalty. It honors family, but places the city above even a brother. It is born from mixture, but guarded by sacred boundaries. It begins with myth, but moves quickly toward law, war, and institution. This is why the founding legend remained powerful for so long. Romans looked back to Romulus not only as a distant figure, but as a symbol of Roman nature. He was the founder who drew the line, gathered the people, organized power, and defended the city. But he was also the man whose rise was stained by Remus's blood. Rome's greatness and violence were remembered together. As Rome grew, this story would follow it. When Romans built walls, they remembered boundaries. When they incorporated defeated peoples, they remembered the asylum and the Sabines. When they debated power, they remembered the danger of rivalry. When they marched to war, they remembered Mars, the divine father of the twins. In the next episode, we move from founding myth to royal tradition. Rome, according to its own memory, was ruled by 7 kings before the Republic was born. Some were warriors, some were builders, some were lawgivers, some were foreigners. And the last of them became so hated that Rome swore never to tolerate kings again. The story of Romulus and Remus has given Rome its birth. Now we turn to the age of the kings, where the young city begins to take shape.